This meeting is for 1 hour and 30 minutes. Sean J will be sharing on This is the How and Why of It for 50 minutes. Sean, thank you for your service and your willingness to share your life with us today. We are delighted to have you with us. At this time, please help me give a warm welcome to Sean J from Long Beach, California. His home group is 435 Compton Group. Welcome, Sean. Please take it away.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. Sean Alcoholic. If we could just take a moment of silence and connect to the stillness that is always with us, I would appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you for having me, Broken Elevator Group, and Tamara for reaching out to me. It's always a honor to be of service, and I love talking about Alcoholics Anonymous, and I love talking about God. My home group is 435 Compton Intergroup in California. I reside in Long Beach, California. My sobriety date is August 3rd, 1981. And I'm really grateful to be a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm gonna start with reading the rest of what Tamara couldn't fit on the flyer. I sent her, of course, following directions is always difficult. I sent her way too much information. But it's on page 62 of the big book, Alcoholics Anonymous. This is the how and the why of it. First of all, we had to quit playing God. It didn't work. Next, we decided that hereafter in this drama of life, God was going to be our director. He is the principal. We are his agents. He is the Father, and we are his children. Most good ideas are simple, and this concept was the keystone of the new and triumphant arch through which we pass to freedom. It would have been a bit much to get on the flyer. So the keystone, that third step, and that's what I wanted to talk about today as a pivot, a hinge, the keystone, if you have it. That third step decision. I'm sure most of you are probably familiar with Joe and Charlie. Joe McHugh is somebody that I appreciate, and I've read his books, and I've been through the Joe and Charlie workshop with sponsees, with a sponsor, with a group of men, with a mixed group. And Joe said that that step 3 decision was about the best you could do. Everything else was done to him in this process of Alcoholics Anonymous, the 12 steps, specifically 4 through 9. I agree with that because that's my experience. But I'm gonna be back and forth a little bit, and hopefully it's it doesn't become nonsensical. I got sober very young. 16 years old, I had a moment of clarity. Doesn't happen to most young people, even though we're seeing a big influx of young people in Alcoholics Anonymous today, and it makes me smile. It warms my heart to see young folks getting this. I was on an H&I panel earlier this week, and I got to sit in a lockdown facility with young men, 16, 17 years old. And I was looking out at these babies and just seeing my face, seeing myself in them. And carried the message of Alcoholics Anonymous. Maybe a mustard seed was planted. Who knows? But I think it's a vital message that you can get sober in spite of anybody, any place, anything. Doesn't matter your age, gender, race, religious background, that we have a solution. If you're a real alcoholic, we have a solution. And the spiritual principles that this beautiful program is based on really have something to offer for everybody. I believe that. So as I said, I got sober at 16. My first home group was a group called Indian Charlies. It was in Artesia, California. It's a very large meeting, very dynamic. I was so lucky, and I'm so grateful to all the old timers that I've gotten to sit with, to listen to connect with, who always told me the truth about my condition. They always told me the truth about Alcoholics Anonymous, and specifically my first sponsor, Johnny Edwards, who knew exactly how to handle an alcoholic of my type. And that first 8 years I was sober. I want to back up just a little bit. I came to you beautiful people hating God. I had no use for God. I didn't want anything to do with anything that had a slight scent of God. And I could sniff it out immediately. And he was spoon feeding me this program. I struggled with the big book. There was too much God in there. I thought it was a trick. They were, even though they were telling me my own conception of God, I knew that once they had me, they were going to force feed that same type of that conception that I came here with, that old belief system, that's what this was about. And I didn't want nothing to do with it. I wouldn't tolerate it. I was violently opposed to it. And he kept spoon feeding me that big book without me knowing it. He built my foundation, him and these other old timers, and I was blessed to be around some folks that they knew how to carry the message. They knew how to enjoy life. They knew how to stay sober in this beautiful fellowship of the Spirit. And I will say that the spirit of the fellowship, going to meetings, being connected to my sponsor, my home group, really served me well. And I had a spiritual experience in the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous in relation to alcohol. You know, my conception of God really started as a group of drunks. I can't do this alone. Together we can do what I cannot do. And I didn't want to drink anymore. I was dying of alcoholism. I was young, violent. Of course, I had other outside issues also that helped accelerate my destruction. And I wanted to live. You know, my sponsor died when I was 8 years sober. I know in hindsight now that I had made him my higher power, my home group. Both of those were very important. I didn't understand at that time that my real reliance was upon God, that I was beyond human aid. I didn't really get that concept. I came unhinged, did not handle his passing well, left my home group, started a process of what I know today are a path of, I shouldn't say a process, a path of untreated alcoholism. Physically sober, not an ounce of alcohol in my system. Spiritual malady, self-reliance, soul sickness, the dark night of the soul, untreated alcoholism. And I would continue to die of it for many, many years, a couple of decades. And I continue to repeat the same path over and over again from 8 years sober till when I finally had a deeper second surrender at 28 years sober. I don't say any of this with any kind of pride, but I believe it is a story that needs to be told, that has value. It is something that I see happening with many, many folks who get the booze cure, as Bill Wilson called it in his letter on emotional sobriety. And they can't get to that trust and reliance on a power greater than themselves that will solve all their problems. I love what Bill talks about in Bill's story. It's on page 13. And when these things were done, I would enter upon a new relationship with my Creator. I would have the elements of a way of living which answered all my problems. Belief in the power of God, enough willingness, honesty, and humility to establish and maintain the new order of things were the essential requirements. And man, the suffering that I put myself through to come to that. That's part of the story I want to share with you folks today. As I said, at 8 years sober, I came unhinged. I left Alcoholics Anonymous for a couple years, didn't drink. Married a pretty girl in AA, bought a home, eventually bought a vacation home, was working at the oil refinery, had a nice financial situation, stock portfolio, pension, 401k, 2 purebred dogs with papers, nice new cars in the driveway, beautiful home with on the winding street where the trees kind of go over the top of the street, all the families out waving to the neighbors, children playing. Seems like a beautiful life, you know. But I'm restless, irritable, and discontent. I'm continuously attempting to live a life of satisfaction. I don't want to suffer. I'm not trying to be miserable. But as we say in Compton, I got my ladder on the wrong wall, you know. And I believe that, you know, we're conditioned also this way. You know, society isn't helping us with any of this. We're conditioned to believe that success and happiness is accomplished by achievement, by working hard, by getting more, by getting to the top, compete, win, acquire, consume. And that's just pounded into us. Some of our friends here are from other countries. This is my experience in the United States. What I see of the world is pretty much similar. I've been able to extensively travel around the world, and I see it even in countries that tended to be maybe a little bit more religious or spiritual, that they're putting their ladder on the wrong wall also, it seems. So I continued down this path, and water seeks its own level. You know, the consciousness that creates the problem cannot fix the problem, cannot alleviate the problem. You know, I suffer. I love what the Big Book says. It says it much better than I could. It says, I don't paraphrase, suffering from the delusion that I can wrest satisfaction out of life if I just manage well. And that's how I live, you know, driven by 100 forms of fear. I believe self-centered fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity. You know, I step on the toes of my fellows and they retaliate. I often don't know why. I get my feelings hurt. I'm just trying to live, you know, but as I said, I got away from Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm chasing the money, property, prestige. I've been diverted from my primary purpose. I don't think I ever really quite bought that was my primary purpose. I wasn't here to serve God. I was here to, now that I'm sober, I actually thought I was going to be a better operator, and now I was going to be able to use all of my abilities, my intellect, my work ethic, my ability to grind and hustle, you know, to get out there and acquire all those things that meant a satisfactory, successful, peaceful, contented life. I also must say that I come from a poor background. Some of that is, a lot of that has come, I should say, a lot of that has come out in the inventory process where all my life, I suffered from this sense of lack, just this deep hunger within me, insatiable thirst. And I know today what it was that sense of lack was my separation from God. I didn't know that then. I thought it was because growing up I had to wear these hand-me-downs that had patches on the patches that had already been put in. That as I grew, I didn't get new pants. We added lengths at the bottom of the pants. That the white shirts that I was supposed to be wearing were kind of more of a off-color grayish white. And the humiliation and the sense of being less than and all of that started to get instilled in me. The trauma, I went to private Catholic school, had a lot of trauma there. There were some things that happened to me there that shouldn't happen to anyone, let alone a child. And through inventory, I have found that is where that distrust, that hatred of God was born and bred. And I would tell you that through inventory, through steps 6 and 7 and 8 and 9, I have found forgiveness for the nun who was a perpetrator, who was my abuser. My relationship with my parents, who were told by classmates what was happening to me, who had a meeting with 2 nuns at the school, one being the principal and one being another nun, and were told that it was just vivid child imagination. It sent me back to my abuser, which continued for the rest of that school year. I was able to have conversations with my mother about that. I was able to allow her to heal and for her to find peace with that and for our relationship to grow closer through that forgiveness, through that healing, which can only come through God's power. All of those things have happened in Alcoholics Anonymous. So I continue to chase money, property, prestige. I'm set. I got everything. And it starts to fall apart. The edges start to get worn, a little tattered, and things unravel. She doesn't stay sober. All the things that start coming with a practicing alcoholic in a relationship, the lies, the deceit, the betrayal, the theft, and it all falls apart. I lack character. I lack principle. I lack any sort of support other than myself. And I do what I do best when my power, my will becomes insufficient. I have 2 moves at that point. I blow it all up. I just destroy all of it, or I run away. In the end, that's what I always do, of self. And I ended up just filing a bankruptcy on everything, walking away, leaving her there. She lived there for another year, running electrical cords to the neighbors, and the whole insanity of that. This becomes a common theme. And what I do, and I did it. So this was from 8 years sober to 28 years sober, is just a litany of terror. Doing the same things over and over, expecting a different result. Never understanding and never seeing the common denominator as me, and that lack of power and lack of character is my problem. But I follow my pattern. I go on a 3-year go back to AA because I'm becoming unraveled. I go to a meeting where it's basically we don't drink no matter what. Don't really much talk about the book. Nobody really talks about God in a positive way. It's a den of wolves and thieves, and it's a bunch of sober horse thieves, and I fit right in. And I have nothing but love for that group. I wouldn't have stayed sober. I couldn't have come to folks that were talking about God, spiritual principles, and service and love and kindness, because I didn't have any of that in me at that time. I was just not drinking. And I had a 3-year period of complete obsessions of the mind. I didn't turn to the 12 steps and God and a sponsor because I don't have a sponsor. I turned to what I always turn to. I live my life based upon my thinking and my emotions. That's how I live my life. And so I go on this 3-year just debauchery. My defects of character are dragging me around. See, I still have this delusion that I'm in charge, that I'm in control, but really I'm being dragged around by my defects of character. And they're acting out sexually, at work, financially, every area of my life. I'm basically living like I'm drinking, but I'm not drinking any alcohol. And I get to this point where I'm so restless, irritable, discontent. I'm so sick. I'm so spiritually sick. I'm completely consumed by self that I have this like moment of, oh my God, I got to do something. I still don't turn to God, spiritual principles, go through the process. It always is get in a relationship, make her my higher power, try to live a normal life, get a home, acquire a bunch of financial things, material wealth, and settle down, live the good life, and be committed to that. That which I am seeking is seeking me. Sick attracts sick. And I always find another hostage. Or I become the hostage. Don't know, and it really doesn't matter who's the hostage and who's the jail keeper. It takes both. And maybe the roles exchange. And then I go through that again for however long until I either blow it all up or I run away. So I have a second marriage, ends in complete insanity. In the meantime, I had left AA again. In this marriage, at 22 years sober, I got to this place where I came back to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I went back to that same place in Long Beach. And something was different this time. So I knew if I left AA again, I wouldn't be able to do this again. I had this moment, another moment of clarity. I knew in the fiber of my being that if I left AA again, I'd get drunk. And I went back and I crossed that threshold, that meeting, and I got that sense of ease and comfort that comes, that, man, I'm safe, and I was scared. That was something new. I never really thought that I was afraid. I didn't see fear as part of what made me. It wasn't part of my makeup. I just thought I was angry. And I had every reason to be angry. Look at these marriages that I've been in. Look what these women have done to my life. Look at all these things that I've had to deal with. It's never my fault. It's always it's all of you. you're the problem. If you just act right. And I went to those meetings and I got connected. And I know now in hindsight what happened was I had acquired just enough humility. And for me at this point in my life, in my sobriety, humility could only be acquired via humiliation. I wasn't at a point yet where I could reach for humility for the sake of character building and wanting to be a better human being. But it was enough humility to where I started to have an open mind. I started to have a quality of willingness that was sufficient to keep me in the middle of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm grateful to say that I haven't had to leave AA again from almost 20 years now. I've been in the middle of Alcoholics Anonymous. So I still don't have a sponsor. 22 years sober, but I'm doing things differently. I'm starting to talk with folks. I'm going to a lot of meetings. A man comes into my life when I'm 26 years sober. That man saved my life. His name is John Flynn. He's my sponsor today. He's been sponsoring me now for almost 16 years. And he had no business being at that meeting. My sponsor is a kind, gentle, loving, doesn't cuss, doesn't raise his voice. And he's in this meeting with all these wolves. He had been going to this a few meetings in the area he lived. And he thought his sobriety or his meetings were a little dry, and he wanted to try something a little different. Somebody that went to that group met him at another meeting and invited him, and he came. And I was immediately attracted to him. He had something that I wanted. I didn't really quite know what it was, but he was different than everybody there, and he was much different than me. And me being arrogant as I was and full of self, I was going to watch him for a while, and then maybe I'd let him sponsor me. You know, I didn't wait too long because I couldn't. I needed help. I was really sick. I need help today. I never want to forget that. I'm a human being, and I'm sick, and I need help. And he just started talking to me. And we would have conversations, and he never told me what to do. He always talked about what he did. He always talked about what happened in his life, in his experience with these 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'd listen to him talk from the podium, and my mind would say, well, that's the dumbest thing I ever heard. That's not going to work. There's no way possible that that's going to work. It just doesn't make sense. And then that was followed with a second thought. You ask this man to help you. Why don't you do what he does? Give it a shot. What do you got to lose? And see, my ego was so strong that it wouldn't allow me to give it a half-hearted attempt. No, I'm going to give this thing my best effort. And I'm so sick that my egos and my mind is saying, because then when it don't work, you can tell them, see, I told you that wouldn't work. I'm right. And lo and behold, I would do what he did, and it worked. That was one of the first times I learned that Sean didn't have to believe in something for it to work. That I could just take the contrary action, like when I was new, which I'd forgotten all of that, take contrary action, and I would get results. That was huge for me. And it seems so simple now, but in that moment, it was life-changing. And I know now what was happening is I was through right action, was changing my thinking. I was gaining humility. The quality of willingness was improving. My open-mindedness was expanding, and my level of honesty was growing. And I kept having those experiences with him. I wish I could tell you that in this moment, at that time, I had learned my lesson, and now I was on this beautiful path to a right relation with God, and that I'd embrace our three legacies, and all was well. But that's not my story. At 26 years sober, I got finally realized with my wife, who was a chronic relapser, that I was never going to change. They had a intervention for her, and I was out in the living room, and all these women that were in AA and Al-Anon were there, and they were talking with her, and she was loaded in the intervention, and they weren't doing it right. You know, they were being way too condescending and placating, and I was livid. When is somebody going to tell her? And I couldn't take it anymore, and I stormed into the room, and I said, "Isn't anybody going to tell her the truth? She's loaded right now. Aren't any of you guys going to call her on that? What the hell's going on here?" You know. And her sponsor, who's a dear friend of mine, who I was very resentful for blamed her. Like, if you'd been a better sponsor, this wouldn't have happened. And she looked at me and she said, "Sean, you seem really angry." I said, "Well, you'd be angry too if you had to live with her, had to put up with this." And she looked at me and she shook her head and she said, "Sean, you don't have to be here." And it just staggered me. I backed out of the room. I had nothing to say. And it was a week later, as I was looking at her, nodding out, sitting on the couch, and I just had another moment of clarity. It's always going to be like this. I have to leave. So I ended that. I would love to tell you, folk, because what I'm going to tell you is very embarrassing. Even though I'm not really embarrassed by it, it's just how sick I was, and it's my story. I still suffer from that sense of lack. I still have that love hunger. I still kept looking to people, places, and things to fill that big, deep, gaping wound inside of me. It wasn't my time yet. So I pivoted from that almost immediately into a relationship with a beautiful, young, lovely woman who was 20 years younger than me and was not even 30 days sober. And you can imagine the outcome of that. This led to my deepest, darkest moment. 28 years sober. Things are coming unhinged. She is now with a woman who was my friend, who I introduced them, who was going through a divorce, who was hanging out with us, and now they're together. And I went to have a conversation. I was asked to come and have a conversation with this other woman. And she told me that my girlfriend was going to be there, who we lived together, was going to be there, and we were going to have a conversation. I was so insane that I thought that I was going to go there and they were going to make amends to me and everything was going to go back to the way it was. And I walked into this situation, and it's like the movie The Untouchables, when Sean Connery said, bringing a knife to a gunfight. I didn't even have a knife. And they cut me to ribbons. And this girl that I had, what I thought was love, truly, to the deepest of my ability, loved. I really know that I had an attachment, and she was a possession. and all of that. Now I know that through inventory and through prayer and meditation. And she looked at me and she said, how do you think this was going to turn out? It was always going to end like this. And it crushed me. And I barely got out of there. I was coming apart at the seams. I was hyperventilating. I was driving. I called this woman who's known me since I got sober. Her name's Betty A. She lives in Escondido. Amazing woman. She's been harder on me than any man has ever been. And when I say hard, telling me the truth. And I go, Betty, just coming apart. And she listened for a minute. She says, this is what I want you to do. I want you to go home and I want you to grab all of her stuff and I want you to put it out in the front yard. And I said, well, I can't, what's going to happen to her? She said, it's not your problem. It's no longer your concern. And of course I didn't do it. And, I sat in that car and I couldn't move. I couldn't hardly breathe. I was snot was coming out of my nose. I was crying. I was pounding on the steering wheel. I was making these sounds like a wounded animal. Maybe some of you are familiar with the movie with Harvey Keitel, A Bad Lieutenant. When he had his breakdown, it's exactly where I was at. I know today that this was really that moment for me, where all my human resources failed me. There was only King alcohol because I was thirsty. My mind was telling me to drink. I need to drink. I can't feel this way. I can't feel this way anymore. I always had to move. I always land on my feet. I always got another plan. And I had nothing. And I didn't want to feel the way I was feeling anymore. And I know in that moment that there was only King Alcohol or God. See, I'm somebody who has mocked, scoffed at, thought they had completely dismissed the whole God idea. And in that moment, my true moment, my darkest night of the soul, which had been going on in my life for over 20 years, came to a head. And I cried out for help. And not with any afterthought. I wasn't crying out for help with a bargain, a deal. If you do this for me, I will give you this. How am I going to land? What is it going to look like? What are people going to think? What's in it for me? There was none of that. All there was help me. I cannot live like this. I am going to drink. That help came immediately. It wasn't, finally, Sean, you finally come to me. Well, this is what I need you to do before you were going to get any help from me. None of that. There was no punishing God. There was no dictates. There was no set of things to formulate an agreement. When my heart truly opened and desired God, God revealed himself to me. I had been in a state of paralysis for over an hour in that car. I couldn't get out of it. I was able to get out of that car, walk into my house, the house that I sit in right now. I was able to sleep that night. Things started changing immediately. See, that girl would not leave this apartment. She would not leave our home. And I couldn't get her to leave, and I didn't know what to do. I had no answer. And God removed me from the situation. I got a call from my job. They sent me up north. I was gone for 4 months. Had a new experience in step 4, step 5, step 6, and step 7. I was able to let go of her. Even though for a while I tried to control Long Beach from the East Bay. And I was able to let go of her. Still, a lot had to be let go of. A lot of old ideas, a lot of old belief systems. It was another 6 years. See, I knew I couldn't be in a relationship because I had this deep love hunger, and I had gained awareness that I would make a woman a higher power. And I couldn't even date because then I would try to turn that into love, and and this attachment. See, I thought I had loved that girl, and through inventory, I realized that it wasn't healthy love. It was possession. And it really blew my mind because I always thought, man, I'm not a jealous guy. You know, girl with me, like, she has a maid, and that's why I could never let things be how they were going to be. Like, I couldn't let her leave because how could you leave this? It's such a great deal. We have such a great life together. We're going to conquer the world. No, you need this. And I would try to hold on that attachment. And I realized that I would set up this perimeter wire, and as long as you stayed within that perimeter wire, I was okay. But once you like exerted any free will and went outside what was my perimeter wire, what I thought was okay, my construct, then I'm anxious. I'm afraid. I'm self-seeking. I'm trying to manage, control, manipulate, maneuver. You know, I crave, I covet, I consume. And all of that had to be let go of. But I've come to understand and realize about myself, and this has also come through prayer, meditation, inventory, my two biggest defects of character, my two biggest patterns or sins, whatever you want to call it, are lust and greed. And I went on a 6-year sex addiction. Wouldn't get in a relationship. I started using escorts and sex workers. And I was consumed by it. Traveling the world, making a lot of money. Also had work addiction because I needed to fuel this obsession of the mind, this addiction, sex addiction. And, you know, I literally almost killed myself. You know, I was 51 years old trying to have the sex life of somebody in their mid-20s. I'm doing all the things that you do, you know, all the different pills, all the injections, and almost killed myself. I developed hypertension, chronic hypertension, which led to me not being able to exercise. I went from 220 pounds to 320 pounds in a year, deep depression. My next obsession of mine became food. You know, I started trying to eat myself to death. And at the end of all this, I came to a deep realization that I had to give every area of my life to God. Women, money. See, I thought I knew more about women and money than God. I didn't need God's help in that area. You know, well, you just helped me with the prayer, meditation, my AA life, sponsoring guys, you know, speaking, all that stuff. You know, money and women, I got that. And I got my health too, even though I'm doing a bad job of it. I had another realization around that time. This was big for me. The rules apply to Sean. See, I always thought I was more clever, always how to move. You know, rules were for church folk and dumb people. I never thought they applied to me. Now I can't even roll through a stop sign anymore. And I'm not saying I'm perfect, but I feel that stuff. I feel those things, you know. And I tell you what's happened. I became a member of 435 Compton Intergroup about, let's say, 7 years ago now. And I met a group of people, the fellowship that I crave. You know, we believe in God, big book, strong sponsorship. We build our foundation on that. I'm around people daily. We talk about God. We talk about the literature. And we not only read it, talk about it, discuss it, we utilize it. We are deeply committed to the three legacies: recovery, unity, and service. My relationship with God that I hated, has become the most important relationship of my life. The only relationship that matters. Because from that relationship, everything else just falls into place. I told you about that love hunger, that sense of lack that I've had my whole life. I've been freed from that in this relationship with God. I had so many needy dependencies on all of you to provide to me exactly what I thought I needed to my specification. And I was completely separate from you. I had this deep need. And I always felt like I was alone and nobody got me. And in the end, you were all going to betray me. Today, I don't need anything from any of you. And I've never felt closer to you. I love everybody today. Doesn't mean I like how some folks' defects of character manifest, but maybe they're supposed to manifest that way. Maybe in direct conjunction to me. Maybe I'm supposed to learn something by interacting with their defect of character, and vice versa. To truly be a child of God, I believe we're all children of God. I love Chuck C. We're either all God's kids or none of us are. I believe that we're all God's kids. And my job is to love God's kids, to be of service to God's kids, to be of maximum service to God and to my fellows. Through this 12-step process in Alcoholics Anonymous, I've been able to live that way. See, I told you folks earlier, most of my life, I'm talking about without an ounce of alcohol in my system, I live life based upon my thinking and my emotions. Well, I'm sure most of you know where that leads because you've had your own experience with it. And it's a trap. The ego-fed proposition keeps leading to another self-imposed crisis. The emotion feeds the thinking drives the emotion, and it's just this vicious circle. What has changed? Still not an ounce of alcohol in my system. What has changed is I am now anchored to spiritual principles that Alcoholics Anonymous has laid at my feet, that kit of spiritual tools laid at my feet, familiarized me with, trained me with, honed my skill. And I trust and rely on God. Lack of power is my dilemma. Of myself, I am nothing. The Father doeth the works. I know who I am of self. At my best, I'm a bringer of chaos, confusion, and disharmony. This program has saved my life. Most of all, it brought me back to my Father. I am truly the prodigal son. Today, I spend a lot of time in meditation and prayer. I don't really get caught up in labels. I seek and I take from all the great religions. Taoism and Buddhism were my first ventures. For the last 6 months, I've really been working with the Christian mystics, John of the Cross, Teresa of Avila, Julian of Norwich, Thomas Merton. I'm a big advocate for Richard Rohr, James Finley, Center for Contemplative Action. I love this way of life. I love conscious connection with God. And I want to tell anybody who's working with or struggling or has doubts, that's all part of it. Sometimes there's going to be hours and years of doubt. It's going to be dry. It's going to be hard. Teresa of Avila had an 18-year period where she just stuck with it. In Compton, we say, stick with the saw. It'll cut. That blade will get dull. It'll cut. God is not a euphoria. I was recently reading something and saying that God limits that feeling of God so we can learn, so we can get freedom from that need of that feeling, and we can trust in this power. Be still and know that I am God. It's a mantra that I use every day. Same as thy will, not mine, be done. Today I ask myself, instead of what I think and how I feel, what does the principle require? What do the principles require in this situation? What would the master have me do? I'm here to give love and share love with those who want to give and share love back, but most of all, with those who don't want to or can't. I want to put love where love is not accepted. That is true spirit. That's what God does. I am not God, but I am of God. So if I am aspiring for that perfection that is God and these principles, I hold myself accountable to that. I embrace forgiveness. I forgive everyone for everything. That's the perfect principle. Now I work at that. I practice it. And when I fall short, I ask my Father to help me. I talk to him like he's my dad. He knows who I am. He knows exactly what I need, when and how and where and from who. I love all of you people. This has been a beautiful day for me. It's just getting started. I hope everyone has a beautiful day or evening, wherever you may be in this world. God's got me. AA's got me. And God and AA have you also. Thank you very much for having me. Blessings.